Welcome everyone again to Cosmic Corner, only on Faith Unaltered. I hope that everybody is ready to have a fun and interesting conversation about something that's a little more lighthearted, but I think has just as much practicality as some of the things that we've discussed already here on Cosmic Corner. And I'm excited to have this conversation. Been looking forward to this and kind of had this on the back burner for quite a few months now, and just felt like it was time to pull the trigger on it. So I'm really happy to say that tonight we're going to be discussing the Inside Out movies that were produced by Disney and Pixar. The first one came out in 2015. It was something that rattled my cage a little bit when it first came out because it was way better than I anticipated it being. It was probably one of the best Pixar movies that I've ever seen. I think I've seen all of them, and I think it's probably my favorite. And that's saying something because I grew up with the greats. You know what I mean? Like I was there when Toy Story came out. Like I've seen all the progression. I was there when Shrek came out and changed the game for animation. And man, it's crazy to see what happened with that. But I feel like Inside Out created a new way of looking at that kind of animation. For something that's more than simply the entertainment factor. It became something that had some really great explanatory power. And so I'm really excited to talk about that tonight. With me, again, is Spencer Owen, our counselor friend from the Trauma Informed Church Kid podcast. I can officially plug your podcast channel when you hop on
yes,
here.
You can.
I'm super juiced about that. So
thank you.
Yes, and thank you for all of the invaluable input that you've been for Cosmic Corner since the very beginning. You've been an invaluable asset to me, so I'm very grateful for you as well.
Happy to help.
Yeah, and also with us, just below us both, is Sean, St. Sean. What's going on, bud? It's good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
I am still jealous of your 3M merch podcast t-shirt. I still need to gaslight Nico into sending me one, but that'll be a later project. We'll reserve that for a later time. It's possible that one more might join us a little bit later. I'll withhold an official say so on that until I get word from it. But as of now, this is our panel for this evening. I'm super excited because this is, again, something that has been on the back burner and waiting for this discussion for probably since early summertime. I think it was the first time that we mentioned talking about this. And ever since then, I've been like, I need to make a reason for this to be the next thing. You know what I mean? And so it felt like it was the right time. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into it. And so the first thing that I think, would be an important thing to mention is that this movie is not necessarily made to be a, let's say, like, I don't think that it's meant to be an exact 1-for-1 ratio of all the accuracies you could possibly get out of, psychology and counseling and all of those sort of things. There are some things that they add into the movie that are just fun, kind of pseudo-science animation stuff. And that's fun. It actually, I think, adds to the story. And it kind of reels you in a bit. But some of it is very, very accurate and has a lot of explanatory power. And I'm so blown away at how they were able to condense some of these really complex ideas into these really, really appropriate visual representations of these things, and they leave it all inarticulate for you. It's all kind of implicit. And so if you're not knowing really what to look for, some of it is like way deeper than you think that it is. And it's really, really cool the way that they did that, so that not only are the kids enjoying this and they're garnering wisdom and they're identifying with the character like they would in a normal story, but also it's kind of giving them a reason to start thinking introspectively. It's kind of giving them a reason to think about themselves as like more than just what they think they are to other people as they're being seen, but also what's really going on inside and why it is that your emotions and your let's say your reactions to things or your lack of reactions to things can sometimes really impact the way that you see yourself, not just the way that other people see you, but the way that you see yourself.
Especially in the second movie, that takes
Oh, yeah.
front and center. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the second movie did a great job of maturing not only the character, but the entire landscape of the idea. They did a really great job
Right.
expanding on the second one. And I don't want to say it too nonchalantly, but I almost feel like the second one topped the first one in a lot of ways. It was really, really great. Also, first thing, before I forget, spoiler alert, we're talking about a movie, and expect that while we talk about the movie, we're going to talk about the movie. So if you haven't seen these movies, don't ruin it for yourself. Take the hype that I'm giving you right now, pause this, and go check out these movies. I'm not offended. This will be here after the live stream. If you have seen the movies, stick around. This is going to be great. But if you have not seen them, we will be talking about the movie in detail, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So first housekeeping thing out of the way, spoiler alert. Please don't be mad at me that we talk about the movie as we talk about the movie. Okay. So that being said, I'm kind of curious, Spencer, since this is really your like realm.
Yeah.
This is really your thing. And I know that you've used these movies in a lot of examples of things that you've explained even to me or to the guys in the Cosmic Crew chat. But in general, I know that you use this also as a tool for everyday use at your job where you're doing counseling. What are the main things about this movie that, especially the first one, that you find to be the most compelling when you're talking to somebody?
Well, I think one of the biggest bits of explanatory power that it has is trying to kind of frame things as if like there's not a single unity always making the choices and acting and feeling like, so especially like in the first movie, for example, at some certain times, like anger for as an example, would reach out and grab the console and then would push a button or pull something, and then Riley the person would react to that. And so I think that really resonated with me and with a lot of my clients as a good descriptor of what it feels like when that one person says that one thing that pushes a button. And I mean, literally, we saw a visual of that where, the button gets pushed and then all of a sudden, like, whoa, it comes out. And it almost feels a little bit like something took me over. Like almost like kind of like it's not even me anymore. Not really in an alien sense, like I'm possessed or anything, but just like it's almost like there's a part of me that is now driving the bus and I'm just a passenger on the bus. And that's an experience that I think we can all just ordinarily under normal, ordinary circumstances relate to. And that's definitely something that a lot of my clients have found a lot of explanatory power in, that I myself have been found very, very helpful to describe and kind of normalize what it feels like when, it feels like a part of me kind of takes over and starts, in some cases, perhaps driving the bus off a cliff. So.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot, there's a lot just in the idea of the emotions themselves being kind of like almost overly allegorized into these actual characters that have their own intent and their own, like, they're not individually, they're not Riley, right? The main character of the story, her name is Riley. She is there. She's a component. She's a person. She has her own mind and thinking, let's say, but the emotive experiences that she has, I think, is really clever, that they're not her. There's something else that she resides with, almost sharing the body sort of thing.
Yes.
Is that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes. And so the one of the primary modalities of therapy that I utilize is something called internal family systems, or IFS. And IFS basically sees a person as being a mosaic of multiple parts that kind of make up the whole. And in the IFS terminology, there is kind of like a core self. And so we kind of see more of that in the second movie than in the first. But the whole idea there is that in IFS, the goal is to integrate all of the parts, because some parts are Like essentially each part has its unique role within the overall system of the person. Like some parts
Mhm.
might be what we call firefighters, parts that are there to kind of like put out fires, or where necessary, start fires if that's what's going to get the job done.
Mhm.
And to kind of like take care to and the overall goal there is to take care of. So like we will normally frame those firefighters as well as the other kind, who are called managers, which are more like, if firefighters are very reactive, like, oh my gosh, there's a problem, put out the fire or start the fire to make this go away. Then a manager is more reactive, who will kind of scan the environment and be always kind of trying to structure the sense of self in such a way that it doesn't cause pain and harm and those kind of things. And that can be either very passive in the background or very active in the foreground. So like, for example, a workaholic part, might be a good example of like a manager, or a part that's very focused on how other people think about me. That might be a very manager part. Hey, Garrett. Hey, welcome.
It's an honor and a pleasure.
Good to see you.
So happy to have you
And
again.
yeah. But anyway, both of those parts, managers and firefighters, we both call protectors, because that's their core job. Is like, there's a threat, there's a danger, there's a sense of something is amiss. We have to go into our mode of protection, whatever form that takes. And then there also tends to be third parts, which we see a lot of in the second movie, what we call exiles. So parts of us that we, for whatever reason, have just kind of taken on the fear, the shame, the hurt, the pain, whatever it is of our lives, and kind of carry that pain on our behalf. And that tends to be very subconscious, very kind of not very aware of. So like when they travel to the back of Riley's mind, that's one of those things that like you would be seeing a lot of these memories of, either traumas or just things that were unpleasant or that hurt or could have threatened a sense of self. So yeah, we might actually think in the second movie of Joy as a manager who's always there to make sure that everything's fine, everything's good, everything's happy, Riley's happy, and we'll get rid of all the bad stuff. Like that's a very manager activity. And that's part of what they do, is to kind of like send away the exiles, because we don't need them. We don't want them. So anyway, that's kind of the picture of the sense of like the psyche as a whole, that IFS utilizes. And so that aligns very, very closely with the picture we see in both of the Inside Out movies. And I've recommended that movie to many of my clients. It's like, okay, if you want to know how I do therapy, here's your homework. Go home and watch an animated kids movie.
Oh man, great homework. That's great homework.
It's quite easy.
I think I would do that homework, actually.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I would do that homework. Garrett, it's so wonderful to have you again. I'm glad that you're able to make it. Bless the Lord.
It's been too long.
It has.
Welcome back.
You know what's crazy is having a month between each of these episodes sometimes feels like a long time and sometimes feels like an exceedingly short time. And I'm trying to figure out whether or not, like, if that's because it's mentally straining to put this much into an episode, or if that's because there's so much other stuff happening in between that sometimes it feels like a short gap and sometimes it feels like a long gap. But I think for the most part, it's probably wise to give myself time to digest whatever it is that we're doing here for next time, because this is something else, man. So I remember when I was listening to Spencer and Nicholas talk on Trauma Informed Church Kid podcast. By the way, if you haven't yet, please check out Spencer's channel and like and subscribe there as well. He was talking with Nicholas Solner, another one of the frequents on Cosmic Corner, and they were talking about the way that they enjoy having these free flow conversations and things like that. One of the things that you guys said that has stuck with me is probably one of the coolest compliments that I think I've ever gotten, directly or indirectly, is that you both agreed that the Holy Spirit is here. And I was like, man, if nothing else ever comes out of this, I'm pleased, right? Like that is just so gratifying because it's true. Like we've been doing this for over a year, and not once have I had any of these conversations devolve into anything that resembles a debate or just mere bickering or a disagreement for disagreement's sake, anybody poking the bear. It's just been the most amazing series of events to see how this has all transpired. And it's just a weird, it's a weird but awesome thing that God does when he brings all of the different pieces together and has them work in unity without making them uniform. You know,
I
like
love it.
he's so good. But
Love it.
yeah, I am blessed again to have you here, Garrett, and I'm so thankful that you're able to make it. Some of the things that Spencer was just talking about, I think, are really crucial for understanding the reason why we wanted to talk about this movie specifically. But what I think is important is if we do kind of a short walkthrough of some of the main plot points for the movie and why it is that they kind of form themselves into the thing that we think that we're watching is so useful and informative. It is entertaining. Don't get me wrong. It's very entertaining. It's a great movie, but it's also just the way that they form the thing together and the way they weave all the different pieces is very clever. And a lot of it is something that I like, having seen it enough times now I can anticipate, but wouldn't have guessed the first time that I was watching it that that's how they were going to kind of paste the thing together. One of the things that I find to be probably the most compelling about it is the very intro to Riley and her character and the way that the emotions are introduced. And the first thing that's there is joy, because Riley, being a rather normal kid, opens her eyes and, let's say, sees, recognizes, has the experience of being not just a newborn, but an infant with eyes to see and experiencing the world for the first time. Everything is new. Everything is novel. And the first thing that she sees and recognizes, which I think they do well to leave silent and inarticulate, it's one of those things they leave really implicit that they do really well with this, is the first thing she sees and recognizes is the pleased and loving faces of her parents. And that births joy, let's say. And Joy gets to be the first one to touch the console, which, by the way, the console is but a single button in the very beginning of the movie. It's immediate interplay between the emotions and the expressions. Yeah. There's no buffering whatsoever. That intro is really, really brilliant because it allows us to see the prominent place that Joy has, but the prominent place that Joy thinks she needs to maintain. Right?
Yeah, that actually has a lot to say for attachment theory, which is one of the things that I talked about in my follow-up podcast after Nicholas and I talked. And so, shortest version possible, that's our sense of self, essentially, that we develop based off of those early attachment bonds and early attachment relationships. And so there are, like, some children, for example, who the very first experience might be joy, but they might very soon after have a feeling of, like, fear, because I never feel like those caregivers are around, or whenever they are, they always seem to be angry and scared or whatever, or completely worn out or whatever. And please hear me. Like, I don't say that to be like, okay, well, parents, if you're going to be worn out with your brand new baby, then you're ruining your child. That's not it at all. Because those early years are very formative and flexible. So a lot can happen and a lot is possible in those years, both for good and for bad. So no one mistake is ever going to make the whole edifice crumble. But yes, it does give a really good kind of pictorial image of what attachment patterns look like when we see our parents for the very first time. We go, oh, they love me. That has a reaction that imprints itself on our psyche.
And I'm especially curious too, because I know that everybody, I'm pretty sure we're all parents here. Like we're not just experiencing this movie as, let's say, post babies. We're also on the end of what's being received. So I'm curious as for you guys, what were you guys as like as you watched the movie for the first or the 50th time? What is your like, let's say, the physical reaction that your emotions have to seeing Riley's experience of her parents for the first time? Because for me, that I cried immediately. And it's like, let's say I'm
That's
an
a
easy
punch
crier.
5 minutes in. And
Right. I can admit I'm an easy crier. I'm a bit of a sap, but you know what? Like that hit me hard because like being a kid changed everything about reality for me. Being a parent really did that like tenfold. Right. And so I as a parent, it's sometimes difficult to look back and remember that you were all of these different phases and ages that you see in your child. But one of those things that your child will never remember the way that you do is those first interactions, like you were saying, those bonding pairing moments where you as the parent know consciously, well, maybe not all parents, but this parent knew consciously that that's what was happening with the child was I am in a position to have a relationship that is simply unmarred by anything that I don't bring to it. Right. And so like all of the good that I bring to the relationship is the good that I want it to be. All of the negative that I bring to relationship are all the things that I'm going to try my hardest to avoid passing off onto this thing that I have right here. Like for all the remarkable things that are in the world, it seems like the whole world is shrunk and here it is in my hands. Like that's the feeling that you get as a parent looking at that for the first time. And when your kid smiles at you for the first time, like it's almost like everything else kind of melts into that thing. Their face contains the entire world. You know what I mean? Like, do you guys share that experience? Because when I watched that, it broke me. You know what I mean? Like, what did you guys think of that?
I think that's a gift from God, right? Like, every person who comes into this world, the first thing that their eyes behold is the image of God, right? So they're seeing their parents, they're seeing the image of God, and they see and they instantly intuit all good things come from you. You are the one who provides me with everything. And the parent looking at their child with just this doting love, I would do anything for them. All good things are contained within you. Like it is this act of worship where we're caring for one another, we're loving one another. And I remember asking, and I'm sure you guys remember, I remember asking, like, what is a person? Remember this conversation that
I do remember that. Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about it, and Spencer provided a great resource. And I was thinking about it, and I'm just like, maybe personhood is just something that we recognize in another imager of God when we recognize God in that person. And we just kind of apply personhood to that. So in a sense, you can say when your child is born, something to the effect of, little one, I've never met you. And yet I can look at the image of God in you and say, you made me in my womb and I love you. And so I think that there's just this beautiful energy that's going on between a parent and a child. And it creates this trust, and it creates these just deep bonds where you would do anything for the other. And I think, not that anyone here is necessarily a Calvinist, but the first question of the Westminster Catechism: what is the chief end of man? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And part of that forever starts at that moment between a parent and a child.
Amen.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, so two reactions, right? One is just being a parent for the first time. Two reactions to the movie, right? So I'll start at the latter first. I'm blown away by the movie just because I think their ability to communicate the concepts in the brilliant way they did, I just thought it was very accessible and well executed. So accessible, well executed, and brilliant in that way because it really helped. It's a transpersonal personality isn't something people think about all the time, and perhaps even saying those words might bring new light to it. And of course, we have Spencer here to make sure I don't say anything dumb. Um, but for me, that the way they presented that, the way they brought it to life, and the power it had in communicating how that is a thing, I think it's a bit of a shakeup for the average person who watches that film and thinks, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? It's like, this can't be, is this it? I can feel like it's kind of like this. I think it just takes people and puts them into a bit of a liminal space about what it's like to live and to be and to interact and participate in the world. And so I just think it's brilliant. And I think it's amazing fertile ground to bridge the modern Western nominal person to an ancient world with principalities and powers and angels and demons. And there's organizing principles all over the place that are coming in to talk and to move and to sway and to be embodied. And so I thought it was brilliant. And I can't wait to just learn all of these perspectives through the frame of experts and the brothers on this call. Davidson, you said something earlier about the Holy Spirit being here. And I just want to remind everybody that there were only 120 people in the upper room, and they transformed the whole world. All right. So I know there's only 4 of us on the call here today, but that's pretty good. Leonard Ravenhill would say one man with God is a majority. All right.
Yeah.
To being a parent, holy smokes. I mean, it's funny because at the birth you think, wow, here's this transformative experience I've been through, and taking care of my wife in a whole new way, of seeing her in a whole new light, of anticipating this brand new human being, this brand new image of God. And then you have the birth and you think, wow, it's all here, the transformation complete. And it's like, no, you are just beginning. You are just beginning to climb the mountain. And it's hard to say it, right? I heard a quote just yesterday while I was mowing the grass. I thought it was a brilliant quote. It said, everything you want in life is on the other side of hard. And I thought that was just brilliant, right? Because, nothing meaningful is easy. And certainly being a parent, raising a brand new human being is not easy, but it will pull out the best in you if you let it, right? Now, sometimes that looks like an ugly part of you coming out that you need to experience and encounter again fresh in a real way, and not only encounter that experience coming out of you, but see how it's received by this tiny human being who trusts you implicitly. It is a clarifying mirror to put up, and I love, Sean, what you said about it's this, you see the image of God, they see the image of God, and it's when you respond with a pure image like that, untainted by growing up in enemy territory, it's a really good mirror. It's a really good mirror to just chisel away. And if you can let that chisel come, it's the best version of you is yet to come. Right. And if you'll just let the Lord do his work through this tiny baby and what he or she needs from you, it's just this unbelievable thing. So I loved that. Spencer, I loved how you talked about it imprinting on your psyche. Whoever said that was brilliant, because not only does that joy imprint when they first see, but that imprint never goes away, right? If you guys were in sports, I grew up, I played a lot of sports. I would just wait and look for my parents in the crowd, right? I don't know why, but I would just look for them. And if they weren't there, I wouldn't perform as well. I would feel a little bummed out. And the moment my eyes would find them, I would just light up. It's almost like that imprint from birth is still there. It has the same amount of tremendous power, right? And hey, maybe that's a lesson to all of us, is that as we grow older, we never stop participating in our children's lives, because guess what? They need that image of God to come in and shine on them.
Well, and that desire that we have to never stop participating and to light up our eyes when their eyes and our eyes meet, all of that is that fractal image of God experience there. So it's we have that desire, and our kids reflect that desire precisely because that's the way God feels about us.
Oh, what a cap.
You're muted, Josh.
You're muted, Davidson.
I was going to say, I really sorry, I didn't realize I was muted still. I really like the way that you just kind of close that together. I love that Saint Sean integrated the image in the situation. I'm honestly surprised that wasn't the first thing that I said, but I love the way that you put it together. And then Spencer just now with the way that it ties together as technically Garrett said it first, that it ties together as a permanence, and that this is a feature of human existence. This is a feature of relationship. This is a feature of growth and integration, that the things that you learn from your parents, surprise, become part of who you are. That's amazing. Like, and the fact that this comes back to why it is that we are meant to image God and who it is that Christ says our Father is when we pray. If you didn't know that a Pixar movie could make you worshipful, like, just thinking about some of these things is really, like, I can't help it. Like, you guys make me feel like I'm just explosively happy about this. But I'm like, I want, what I think is really amazing is that the movie itself, and this is the funny thing, they take these really obvious things. It's really obvious. I remember the whole 90s, there was movies about young prepubescent children who were uprooted from their school and their friends and their neighborhood and moved to god awful somewhere else because dad started a business. Like, this is the same movie we've seen 1,000 times, but it's done from the inside out. That's what makes it what it is. It's not actually a terribly unique story, right? Like a sporty young girl whose dad needs to restart things, and so they move across the country, and she goes from, you know, snowy hometown with her friends to like big city life, and it's like, this is 1,000 stories condensed down into one. But that's just the window dressing of what the movie is about, right? And so, like, the fact that they do it that way, they're reverse engineering the story from the experience of the inside of the person who's the main character. Is something that I think that's the reason why it was kind of like mind-bendingly easy to identify with, because that's the experience I have, is an internal one. Duh, like, that's the one that's easiest for me to identify with, because the thing that I mean by me is the inside parts. The
Right.
You know, like the ability to experience all this externally and act in the world and stuff. It's like, that's all amazing. That's an expression of the thing that I call I or me. But the fact that I have an I and a me is the thing that features as the main portion of the story. It's like all of this stuff that makes up what you mean by I or me is a huge landscape. You know what I mean? Like, I love the way that they spread all this out conceptually across all of the different components in the movie. They were able to take some of these things and separate them in ways that make them make sense, and combine them in ways that make them make even more sense. Like, even just with the idea of the console and the screen, and the fact that the emotions are separate from her but really part of her, right? And then what's in the backdrop behind them, this is something that I wanted to have as the image. They're all looking out. You guys can see this. They're all looking out on those islands of her personalities, or personality in its unity. The way that they all unite together is by way of that console room. And so there's the unity, there's the pieces, they're together, they're separate. It's just conceptually brilliant. Like, I don't know how they thought of this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, God, that blew me away.
One of the things that I really appreciated was that, and this was definitely a theme that happened throughout, but with both within each individual movie and also across both movies, is that sense of self, of who Riley is, that I, so to speak, kept like changing and evolving. And so I think sometimes we kind of have this idea in our heads, partly because we have Plato brain, not Plato the squishy, but Plato the philosopher. Because we have Plato brain, we tend to think of ourselves as like having some kind of little like spark or like a force ghost or something in our heads and ourselves, and that's the real me. And the job that I have in life is to like seek out and find that real me that is hidden somewhere in my psyche somewhere. And so I really appreciate, actually, and I find it to be a very biblical, theologically sound perspective, I guess you might say, to not depict Riley in that way. That like there isn't like a hidden Riley somewhere deep inside that they had to uncover and unmask. It was
Right.
more like all the choices Riley made became who she became. They shaped her, they molded her to the point where like there wasn't like her apart from the life she lived in the body, which I think that's very, very, very much a Judeo-Christian sense of the person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perhaps
I
being
actually,
slightly
that's
lost
brilliant.
these days. Yeah.
Go ahead, Garrett.
No, it's okay. I just want to add on to that because I think it's Spencer, you kind of said it, and a long time ago I heard I want to say this carefully, and I don't think I'm about to, so just please forgive me, but a long time ago Leonard Ravenhill said something that really hit me kind of hard. He said, the church isn't going to suffer because the world makes it suffer. The world is going to suffer because the church is going to make it suffer. And what he meant by that is people, I don't know how to say it, but take their Christian walk really lightly, and they carry it as if it's a light thing, which is not a good thing. But outside of the confines of a really good tradition to help you frame in or contain the unlimited potential interpretations you could have in the scripture, because it's a library, for crying out loud. We in the West got really stuck into this nominalistic thinking. And so I don't want to go down this too far, but I think there is a sense in which we've lost the idea that we are also our body today. I don't want to say that too soon, but Spencer, you said it just beautifully and simply, that we have this like Plato brain. Well, how did we come to that? Because that wasn't the Christian perspective for a really, really, really long time. Oh, that's right, forever. It's novel and it's new and it's predominant in the West. And surprise, surprise, it's here in the West where we suffer from this idea that we're actually just like prisoners in our body or something like that. And what a tough place to think you're stuck in, a prisoner in your own body, and that this is not the way, and this is not how it was designed to be. This was not the purpose. And welcome Christ, who takes on the body, right, to redeem the body. Like, what a profound statement against the idea that our bodies don't matter. Well, the word of God took one on. So we gotta meet somewhere else. We gotta find the value in the body again, because this is part of who we are. It's integral to who we are. And
not just like pleasant experiences in the body or pleasant emotions. Like that's really the core theme of the whole first movie, is the reintegration and reconciliation of joy and sadness together. And so I think a lot of times we're okay with our bodies as long as they feel good, as long as our emotional world feels happy, satisfied, please, whatever. But like one of the themes in the movie is that we need all of our emotions. So at one point, like Joy actually literally draws a circle on the ground and says to sadness, "This is your circle. This is your circle of sadness. You will stay here, and everything will be fine." It's funny. I've actually talked to some people who try to say like, who is the actual antagonist or bad guy, so to speak, in the first movie? And really, it's Joy, honestly.
Yeah.
Because she's trying to kind of craft this experience, this really carefully curated experience for Riley, that exiles sadness out back to the circle. Whereas what she discovers is, no, actually, all of those. And I think it's a really good lesson for us as Christians to learn, and is that all of our emotions are given to us by God. The way in which they express themselves in a given moment may not be godly, but they are all gifts from God, and they are all and they all have value, and they all need to be treated as worthwhile. I mean, even Jesus wept, for goodness sake. I mean, you were saying, Garrett, like, the Word took on flesh. Well, the Word took on tears too, and that matters. So I think that's a really important thing for us to remember when we're looking at our internal emotional world, and especially in the church, because we can tend to do a lot of like spiritual bypassing, where we like to say, okay, well, just have faith, just trust in God, just believe it'll all be okay, and it's all going to end well, right? God wins in the end, right? It's like, yes, Jesus knew that too, and he still wept.
Yes, I agree. And I think that I think one of the things that you guys just kind of touched on, like, not, well, you didn't touch on, but where my brain went when I heard you guys saying this, like integrating the idea of the incarnation and the importance of the body, as in relation to, Riley is not a compilation of the memories they store in those weird towered banks all over her entire mind's area, right? It's like that scene reminded me almost in like a parody, hilarious, not negative, gross sort of way, the scene in The Matrix where he sees the fields of humans being farmed, you know what I mean? And it's like, here it is, the fields of Riley being farmed to be harvested as core or forgotten memories forevermore. There it is. That's Riley, is just this crazy spread of compilations of disparate memories that either are or aren't of any significance whatsoever, like with the whole gum commercial coming back over and over in her head, like just the jingles and stuff. Like when I was a kid, there was a pet shop that was in the same neighborhood that where I lived, and it was called Wet Pet San Pablo. And so the commercial that used to come on was like a rap song when I was a kid, and it was WETPETS. That's been in my head since I was a child, and it'll never leave. It plays at random still. That's one of those things. It's not a core memory. It's not informative of anything. I literally never went there, but I will never forget that jingle. You know what I mean? Like those kind of quirks, they're showing you that this is all, like you said, I think the theme of what we're talking about so far is integration. All, like recognizing that you're not merely the compilation of all these things. You're the reason why they're a thing, right? And the thing that finds its, let's say, fullness in is the expression of that thing through what you are, and not just who you think you are in that disconnected, my body is haunted, or I'm a prisoner in this flesh thing, right? Like that is such twisted thinking. And it's something that I know I've succumbed to enough times. I know it's something that people who have any form of body dysmorphia, whether that be like they think that they're too fat or too skinny, or that they're not tall enough, or that their nose is too big, or they see these features about themselves, and to them that perception, it's so amplified to them that it begins to show them something about the body, and they think that this is wrong. It doesn't belong. It's not me. Whatever that's supposed to mean beyond the vague, I don't like it. Like you said, Spencer, this doesn't correspond with what I think I should be experiencing because it doesn't please me. Right? Like, I think that this is one of the biggest and firmest roots that the church could learn to deal with in a much better way. That's leading to the identity crisis in the political world, and the whole like trans and gender identity movement that is going on and catching such traction with people, is because it speaks to this. It speaks to that credible lack in your experience. That's like, it's upsetting. Yeah, it's upsetting. You don't like how you are. Yeah, I don't either. Like if I can't identify with that person in that moment, it's because I lack introspection, not because I can't identify with them. Or because I'm simply lying to myself because I think it would be better and more powerful in my semantic argument sort of way to give off an air of confidence. And so I say with all my smugness, no, you are your body, even though that's the thing that makes them feel like they can't be a self. Man, we need to see this. To really, like, there are people that need love from their neighbor that don't even know how to experience that I'm me. Like,
Mhm.
that's such a fundamental thing. I think we all take it for granted, you know, like we all take that so for granted that we know that I'm me, I'm myself. Yeah, I don't like everything about me, but I know that I'm me. And I at least can maintain a constant level of self-preservation. Like, for somebody who's experienced, let's say, sizable bouts of the testing of one's own psyche, to think maybe it would be better if I wasn't here. That amplified by all of the things that we're talking about now, like, that makes for a huge recipe for disaster if it's unchecked. And I don't think that the voices that are out right now in the mainstream are in any sense encapsulating the things that Garrett and Spencer just talked about. This is like crucial, practical level stuff. I'm glad you guys mentioned it.
Well, integration. I had literally just wrote that down right before you said that, right? Because yeah, I loved Spencer, you bringing up the part where she draws a circle, where joy draws a circle around sadness, right? Because what you have in some sense is a tyrannical taking over of the whole personality, right? It says joy says, well, hey, joy will take over, right? And you can see that in the body today, right? The story you were just talking, like, well, hey, don't you just have, don't, we're not given a spirit of fear. You name the scripture that gets used almost like a club to beat that person back into how that person expects them to operate. But the point there would be that it's like a tyrannical application of what needs to be properly integrated in the right order. And you see the other side of this happen in the following movie, right, where it almost goes the opposite direction, and chaos takes over, right? And I know it's anxiety that it turns everything kind of into chaos, right? But it would be both of those. You see both pendulum swings, and it's all because of improper integration. And I love that the solution at the end of both is proper integration. It's to come together, to find where the one needs the other, where the one should lead and the other follows, and the next time the other follows and the other leads, those kinds of things. But that is everything. And it's almost as if in the first movie, Joy won't let her go deep enough into exploring the edges of her personality and her personhood and her experiences in the world. And because she won't let her explore the edges, she stays shallow, and she can't be shallow. That's not who she'll needs to be. Right. And she almost makes a terrible choice in the first movie based on that. Right. Because she just doesn't know what to do, because the shallow person can't actually feel the depth of feeling that she needs to feel to operate in the world, to respond and to integrate as she goes. So I love that, because then the coming together happens, the integration happens, and then Riley begins to deepen as a person. Right. And then the second, the second movie, boom, now we're real deep as we pump ourselves through puberty. And now there's a whole nother set of things that we have to integrate. And notice that the original reaction wasn't to properly integrate. It wasn't like they learned anything, the first time around. Right.
Yeah. Well, when I talk with clients about healing and wholeness and recovery, that's the term I use, is integration. That's what this is. That's what we're aiming for, is integrating all parts of yourself into a cohesive whole that doesn't exile any parts and allows for all of them to kind of have their say and to have a positive role in the system. But it's not just an internal integration, it's also an external integration. So like, it happens in community. So like in the first movie, for example, at the very end, what actually brings all of that together and makes that integration possible, like sadness got Riley there back home after she tried to run away, but what really healed was the family group hug.
That's
them
right.
all coming together and saying, I love you, it's okay, I'm scared too, I miss Minnesota, and also we're here for you together. So like having that moment of external integration. And then in the second movie, one of the core problems that starts to really set the snowball rolling downhill is that she disintegrates herself from her two best friends,
Right.
from Bree and Grace. And because she's trying to like reintegrate with a whole new group, which again, none of this is like, well, that's bad. It's more like, no, like the way you went about it, the way in which it happened. And again, this is not like, oh my gosh, a 13-year-old screwed up. Of course she did. but part of what it looks like it's just purely descriptive of like, this is what happens when we disintegrate ourselves from our communities that we have established, that we live in, that define who we are. And we saw that quite literally in the second movie, where like anxiety reaches out, takes that sense of self that was built by several moments with Bree and Grace, and rips it out and chucks it off in the back of the mind. And so it's like, that's exactly what happens when we try to disintegrate ourselves from our communal tethers, is we lose our sense of self. So,
and if I may say, the second movie, The Time of the Resolution, was also a group hug, but it was the emotions, right, where they all came around anxiety. So you have the external healing, and then you have the internal healing, and they're using the same means, which is love. I wanted to speak on the idea of the platitudes that the church tends to throw out to people, and I think we rightly, as we receive these platitudes, we rightly understand that we're being dismissed. Like, it's just a kind way of saying you're on your own. The help for you is not here. Figure it out. And that can be so difficult when you're at war with yourself, because the church is supposed to be a community of love. I think the self is like a microcosm of that. You should be a community of love within yourself, right? And if we watch the movies, we see that when they're acting together, when they're working toward a common goal, and they're respecting and communicating with each other, they're able to accomplish a lot. But when one goes off on their own and there's strife, it causes the problem. So I think that inside we should be a community of love. And I wonder what that would look like if you could actually be, because I don't know that anybody does. I certainly don't. I have problems with myself. But I wonder what that would look like if you could just accept yourself for who you are, not seeing yourself as a single person that's failing, but see yourself as a community and just love that person who you are. I'm reminded of, and of course this isn't the interpretation, but I think it's a plausible application. What will the hand say to the foot? I have no need of you, right? And I'm reminded of that when joy draws a circle and tells sadness, this is a circle of sadness. She's saying, I don't need you. And so I think on one hand, we need to be able to integrate all the parts of ourselves in order to be who we are, because we don't know what shape of piece we fit until we know what shape we are. And that won't happen until we can actually love ourselves as God made us. And the second thing is, no matter how weak or troublesome a brother seems to be, we do have need of them. And so I don't think that we should be dismissive of them, because we can't function without them, right? There's nobody left behind, because this is a family, and it doesn't start to heal until we all group hug around each other.
I love this picture of community on the external and in the internal, and Spencer, Sean, the way you just said that, we define that internal, we need to love internally, but if I can parry that with what Spencer had said, sounds like we need a community to do that. We need to find that web of relationships we are rightly in, because it's there that we find our place. It's there that we find that community who can help inform us of the perspectives that we're blind to. I mean, Davidson, you started off talking about how you love this movie because all they did was shift the perspective, right? It's the same story, but a subtle shift of perspective, and the movie's brilliant, right? Because you can see a bit more of the through line. You can see something more beautiful. And I loved the way the two of you just said works so well together. And what an important message to pump into the world right now on the backside of COVID, on the backside of really communities breaking down all over the place, that it is better to be together, that we need each other, that this is how we actually find who we are, is together with other people. What an important lesson for the church. You know, I'm reminded of Hebrews 10 just off the top of my head. But what an important lesson, and something that should just echo. I hope that phrase echoes down to the lowest pit of hell, and I hope they tremble.
Amen. You know, the other end of that is that one of the things that you guys had mentioned, I think it was Spencer, you had mentioned that the moment, the consummation at the end of the movie is that the parents hug Riley. She has a moment where she's crying. She's still crying, but she smiles while she's so subtle. Beautiful animation, by the way. So subtle that while she's still crying, she's smiling. Right? Reminds me of Peter in the storm. He's walking on the water. We forget while he's doing that the waves and like nothing stopped. Still a raging storm, but he's walking. You know what I mean? Like, she's still crying. She's still upset. The problem isn't solved by simply saying it and hearing your parents repeat it back to you. She still doesn't live at home anymore. That's not changing. And so the problem didn't go away. She got bigger than it because she had that support, right? And it wasn't joy and sadness that healed her. It was her and the parents that healed joy and sadness in her. And they reconciled in their you see what I'm saying? Like, the whole thing came back together as one thing. Like you were talking about, Spencer, is this mosaic kind of all the pieces fitting together finally and properly to make the right likeness of what it was meant to be. And when the parents come together, they're coming together over Riley, right? At first, when they don't realize that there's an issue, the father's like in his head, which I think is brilliant, by the way, that they show you the inside of the parents as well as the boy at the end of the movie when she knocks into him and he's like, ah, and he's standing there like,
girl,
you know,
girl.
Exactly. Like, there's just this high alert in here, and outside he's like, you know, like that contrast that's happening. There's so much that's being brought together so that by at the end of the movie, when you recognize that what mom has inside, what dad has inside, what Riley has inside is coming together to make the family a thing that it wasn't before, right? Like, not that the family wasn't a family before, but whatever familyness is just expanded itself to reach out more, right? Riley gets bigger. Mom gets bigger. Dad gets bigger. Maybe not physically, but let's say in like that.
The muchness.
Like, yeah, the muchness. Like, you're like, and this is something that I feel like has kind of like existed across all our Cosmic Corner discussions, is that your body isn't the end of you. You extend out into the world by way of your influence and your virtues and your vices and all of the things that you spread yourself across reality. You don't end at your body. And Riley's bigness, her muchness, her extension of self, her ability to be an influence and not just to be influenced, grows because of those moments. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's one of those things, is it wasn't just that her emotions reconciled. It wasn't just that her and her parents reconciled. It was that the world became a bigger and better place for each of them individually and them as a family unit. That spirit grew, let's say, to borrow earlier language from other episodes. The spirit of the family gained so much light and power from that experience. You know, like, yeah, go ahead.
No, you got me. Okay. So, I mean, and you even said it, like, I literally just wrote the word down again, and then you said it, reconciliation. It's not lost on me that both of these two healing moments start with a moment of repentance and and they end with reconciliation. Both of them.
Yes.
Right. They start that way with this. I'm going to return home. What a story we are all familiar with.
Symbolism happens.
I love it, Spencer. I love it. And how profound, again, that this reconciliation happens amidst community. How profound is it that Jesus didn't just give us platitudes? He didn't just give us the law. He came here and got in the mud with us. He got tired. He got hungry. He got sad. like incredibly sad, right? I mean, sorry, I just loved that reconciliation, the community. You guys are blowing my mind.
It's good. I love that, and it's crazy because we've gone and ping ponged into so much passion. What's funny is I started on the first touch point of the plot of the movie, and then the movie just kind of that's so fun. That's so fun. But
It's fractal.
so
Yeah, no?
it is, and I think that each of us were ready to be passionate about it already, and we have it so vividly in our heads, and then it attaches to everything because Jesus is the thing that attaches everything to everything else. But in the movie, like the overall story, a couple of things that we learn about Riley is that she's competitive, she's athletic, she's a hockey player, so she's somebody who has a tendency to be someone who knows how to achieve. So she's not like badly integrated to begin with. She's a pretty good kid. She had a pretty decent family, but the fact that from that place something can grow bigger, I think is really, really great, because usually in movies like this, what you have is something that's like utterly broken coming to like relatively working order, and that's the consummation. But what she gets instead is from like a really decent and good family that loves her, and she's like a pretty good kid and like isn't like a screw up or anything like that. Goes through moments of like really testing herself out, and comes out on the other side of it bigger and more in love with her, like not only her life but her potential, her future, her parents, like her family, like all of those things coming together for her didn't come from a place where she was like homeless or an orphan or one of her parents died or some like nothing of that kind of earth-shattering nature took place. It was really such a regular kind of story, but the way that they did it from the inside is something that I think really sets it apart from a lot of other stories that are trying to tell this exact same kind of tale. Is that like the family is really important, and you need to know yourself. Your emotions are not a bug, they're a feature, they're on purpose. You know what I mean? Like that's not an accident. You are supposed to be able to feel the full range of things, and like each emotion has its right expression, its wrong expression. There's a tear for every emotion. There's 1,000 ways to say it, but all of those things come together in 1,000 different stories. But what makes this one unique is that it's told from the opposite end. I think that really kind of it's the everydayness that makes it so profound. I think is that you can really tell at the end of the movie how sacred the family is.
One thing I would like to say about the movie and showing the two different perspectives of external and internal that I think is super important, and I just realized it now, is that influence is not a one-way street, and so you're not influenced by your internal life, and that influences your external, and that's the only way it works, and there's no hope for you. If you change your external world, you're going to change your internal world. And I suffer from that a lot as somebody who's very introspective. I feel like a lot I get caught up in this, well, this is just the way it is, and this is the way I feel, and this will never change. Then on Sunday I go to worship and I be around my people that I love, and it's like, oh, everything's better. And it's like it's so important to understand that your insides are not determining everything, that they also react to what you're around. And so I just thought that was super important, even if it's only for me. I thought that was super important.
No, I would agree, and you actually see that in a couple of different ways throughout the movie. In that, like for example, like those memory orbs, they become one color, and then when they get touched, they kind of turn into a different color. And so I remember there was one memory in particular in the first movie where Riley is Joy and Sadness are talking about a hockey game Riley had, and they remember it totally differently because they just have different perspectives on the same event. And so it's really interesting to remember, like when we get caught in that kind of like spiral of thinking and that overthinking, it's really valuable. And this is something I tell my clients to do an awful lot of times is, okay, this is the voice that has the microphone right now. Maybe it's Joy, and maybe this part of you is hogging the microphone. Or maybe it's anxiety, like we saw in the second movie, where that part was like controlling the console and hogging the console, not letting anyone else near. Okay, so that's the way that you're viewing this event. Is there any other way that this might not be 100% correct? Is there any other part of you that needs to be heard right now? Now, you may have to like very gently ask the part of you that has the microphone right now to step aside. And that is something that I think is fascinating in both movies. In both cases, in the first one, Joy had to give the console to Sadness. In the second one, Anxiety had to let go of the console. Like this is not a matter of like defeating the bad guy by force. It's like an internal releasing and letting go. And so I talk with my clients about, okay, this is the voice that you're hearing right now. What are the other voices that you have in your head? And I don't mean that like in a DID way. I mean that just like in a, we are all a composite piece of all kinds of different parts. And so listen to those other parts. And maybe one part of you really wants to, is saying, this is the worst thing ever. It'll never get better. It'll never change. What are the other parts of you? And let's let them have a voice too. And just simply getting that shift of perspective helps an awful lot to kind of recolor the same experiences very often.
But Spencer, is it okay if I ask you a question? And then I want to come back to something that hit me while you were talking about the story, Davidson. So, Spencer, is that something? So obviously, the best way to effectuate this handing off of the mic is to have somebody there who can state that they're hearing, yes. This all, the microphone come from a particular voice. So, and it's critical because and I heard Vervaeke talk about this. He talks about him as Vervaeke's a cognitive scientist at the University of Toronto. He talks about them as like a downward spiraling insight cascade that that you have to intercept and then help. And he said this. He said it outright that it actually, you need another person to help you do this because it is very hard to do on your own.
Yeah. But
to have someone step in, intercept, and help call your attention to a potential way in which that's not one, is there any wiggle room in there from a different perspective where that's not exactly the case, And so the question is,
you're talking about the art and science of therapy. That's exactly what a therapist does. Is a therapist steps in there into that space that feels wounded and feels impossible and is cascading downward and then or outward or whatever, and is able to say, okay, like I'm another brain. I have a whole different set of parts. And I want to bring some of those into the picture, not because I'm right and you're wrong, but because you can't see where you're wrong. And not because I can, but just because we need something to shake up that dynamic so it breaks the chain and allows for insight of a different kind to occur. So that's kind of like from this, again, from the fractal viewpoint, from the external way. There's also the internal way. So like in IFS therapy, one of the things we do is we try to talk with clients about building up and accessing what we call self energy, which is that like core self that is characterized by calm, curiosity, compassion, clarity, courage, confidence, all those. There's actually 8 C words that attach to that concept. And from a neuroscience standpoint, we would just call that ventral vagal activation. And there's a whole nerdy thing I won't go into about that. But anyway, all that to say that, yes, you are 100% correct, Garrett. Like, because when the parts are running the show and they're driving the bus, they are doing their thing according to their programming. They don't see any other way. And they can't see outside of their limited
anxiety's
window
got the helm and everyone else is shut out.
Yep. That's exactly it. And that's not just true for a panic attack like we saw in the second movie. That's true for any time where there is a disintegrated, fragmented experience. Like in the second movie, they bottled up, half of the emotions and locked them away. And that absolutely is a great picture of what that looks like when we don't actually have a fully integrated self. And so, and you're right, it can't really happen all that well. It totally internally. We have to have the external world to come in, and like in a therapy context, to be able to say, is there any way this could be different? And we also have to have that internal like image of God, our core self that is defaced and somewhat dimmed by the fall, but is not destroyed or completely eradicated, and have that core self characterized by calm, compassion, curiosity, to be able to step into those parts that are freaking out and say, I'm here. I wasn't there when you got hurt in the way that taught you had to be this way, but I'm here now. And how can I help?
Yeah. I think the cool part about that is that, like, if you recognize what's happening, I think to Riley, because what we're all talking about is pretty much based on the first scene where you have this integration, is where Riley is thinking about something because she's upset. She's in San Francisco. She's in a new place. She doesn't know what's going on. They try to go get something that she likes, which is pizza, right? Because Joy keeps trying to keep her attention on things that she can enjoy, because Joy keeps trying to hijack the thing to make a pleasurable, contrived experience for Riley. Riley is kind of chasing the ghost of trying to please herself, because Joy is doing that to exclude sadness. And while Joy is hyper focused on trying to keep Riley's attention, sadness's attention is drawn to the memory that Riley is having of her father. And it's a silly memory of her dad leaning against the car, and the car kind of rolls away and like he falls on the ground or whatever. Like it's a funny, silly, kind of like fond sort of memory. Sadness touches it barely for but a moment. And Riley's relationship to the very past changes in an instant. And what I see from that is the fact that only in negative circumstances are we often aware of the fact that our relationship to the past can change, even if the past can't change. Our relationship to our past can change and does change sometimes. And I think that in relation to what you just said, Spencer, and what you were talking about, Garrett, which is that need for the external to awaken us to the fact that there's something that has changed or something that is formed about our relationship with the past that can be changed, and then foster the parts of your experience and your thinking that will bring about that change of your relationship to the past. I think that's if I'm not mistaken, that's literally the process of overcoming traumas and becoming more integrated for the future, is allowing yourself to change your relationship to the past. It's not about remembering the right things and forgetting the right things. I don't think that's how you're meant to become the fullness of the person. That's not how you properly integrate all of the things that happened to you when you were younger that you don't remember because you strive not to remember. They don't go away, and in the same way that you have a nightmare, the thing that's chasing you, if you don't turn around and look at the thing, you have a perception that it's getting bigger and you're getting smaller. I have this all the time when I have those dreams. That's my perception when I don't look at the thing that's chasing me, is that it gets big and I get small. But when I look at it and it gains a face, it's different. I have a different relationship to it. So you can't keep running from the things in your past that were like trying to haunt you, right? It's something that touches it and makes it a sad memory doesn't make it a worthless memory, right?
Yeah. And what you said about changing your relationship to the past is almost verbatim what I tell my clients when we talk about trauma healing and recovery. Now, I always have to qualify that, because they tend to think of that almost like the Inside Out movies defaulted to, which is, oh, that means I'm going to make it pleasant now. I'm going to make it happy. And how can that possibly be happy? That's not the goal. the goal is to add all the elements back in, to kind of see that experience, not to like, change it and make it happy in any way, but to realize the ugliness and the beauty that is there, and to not allow either to become the sole determining factor of how I interact with myself and with the world. So Timothy Pestis, who is an Orthodox theologian and philosopher, I'm reading a book by him called The Ethics of Beauty, and he talks an awful lot about trauma and trauma healing and recovery in there. One of the things he says is that trauma fundamentally is an excommunication. It's being exiled from ourselves, being exiled from people, being exiled from God, feeling exiled from God, feeling like we're cursed by God. And that experience of excommunication is that's the relationship that we have to that past experience, is a feeling of excommunication. And that's that defines what trauma is. But the healing of it is to be recommuned, to be brought back into communion, both with ourselves and with other people, and also with God at the same time. And so, yeah, I think that's really, really, and then once we have that, act of recommunion, that totally colors our experience of the past. We look back on it from a place of safety, from a place of love, from a place of belonging. And in attachment theory language, we would call that earned secure attachment. It's something we earn because we have to go through the fire and get, melted down and come out on the other side. And it is secure because we feel safe. We feel loved. We feel like we belong. We feel like we have, again, here, and here all at the same time. And that experience of looking back on those past traumas from that place feels very different than when we look back on those traumas from a place of terror and isolation and an excommunication.
Right.
Would you guys say? So I thought about this several minutes ago, and I wanted to share it, and I didn't think it was relevant anymore. And then I was just enraptured by learning about this, because it's everybody should listen to what has been spoken about here, because this isn't like pie in the sky theory stuff. This is boots on the ground, practical living. Someone in your life needs this. Somebody watch it again. Okay. And so Davidson, you were talking about the story and how it's like these simple stories, she's not some orphan or something like that. What's really interesting to me is these moments of trauma, where parts of you are being bound up and tossed to the side, or put in a dark room because you're afraid to go near that, whatever it is. What's really interesting to me is that fundamentally, we did an episode a really long time ago, Davidson, about Exodus, and both of these movies are Exodus stories. And what's also awesome about the fact that they're both Exodus stories is the first Exodus is like it's swapped. It's like an external Exodus, because she has this whole life and then she doesn't anymore. And while she's in that down, dark place of quote death, that part of Riley died, right? And so now it's like, well, how do I rebuild? How do I reintegrate? How do I resurrect again? Right? Or you can have a Greek tragedy where that doesn't happen, and the trauma is just there forever. You cannot overcome. You don't have that communal reconciliation to reintegrate everything properly. And the second one, it's an internal one, right? It's like an internal, because she goes through puberty, right? Well, she also has an external one too. She loses her friends. I mean, that's fair. So there's just a lot going on, and it's just interesting to me that is happening every day. And I love that they use this it's not like a dramatic, less often more rare story of like an orphan. It's this normal girl having normal life experiences. But the point is that these normal life experiences are profound. they are profound exodus narratives. You're going somewhere, you meet a tremendous obstacle or opponent, and the story must transform. And transforming that, we've talked so much about it already, right? The key thing there is to have a community around you to help and to step in. But I just wanted to highlight that Exodus like story, that transformational story, is so core and foundational to what leads to these traumatic moments that lead to these moments of disintegration for the person, and that based on everything we've talked about, right? What's required is a communal reconciliation. So I think that's profound. It applies to every single person, just about every single day in their life. I don't care if you're working on a project for work that's not going to go right because they never do, right? All of that is another simple story. Like I tried to do a project on my house today. I thought it was going to take 5 hours. It took 9. Okay. But what are you going to do? Right. Like that's also a moment of, I was going somewhere, some stuff happened, right? it had to pivot. It had to transform. It was intense, but guess what? I had a community around me that I could be with, that could help encourage me. Like I got pretty distraught, guys. Okay. But I had a community around me to support me, to help me reintegrate what was controlling the microphone at the time, which was this. It probably was anxiety, to be honest. But so I just want to highlight that again, the Exodus story is profound, and it's applying to all of us every day. And it leads to these moments of great importance that require this community, or it's very easy to spiral down an insight cascade, because without you knowing it, you've bundled some of your emotions up and you've tossed them. You're afraid to feel the power of that emotion. Davidson, you always say this. I just think this is brilliant the way you say this, but you're like, look, your emotion is telling you something true. You might interpret that wrong, and you might apply it wrong, but it is not lying to you about, you're feeling something, and it's important for you to acknowledge it and to try and meet it where it is, rather than bundle it up like it doesn't matter, etc. Right?
Yeah. If I could play on the Exodus motif for a minute here, I think the cautionary tale in both of the movies is arbitrarily setting a frame of reference and only attending to those things that you desire. And so in the first movie, we see that it's just not tenable, right? It won't hold up. In the second movie, talk about times where it just breaks your heart when she says, "I'm not good enough." Like that. Yeah. That's what anxiety did to her. And so you have these setting of these expectations, removing facts, removing the truth, only attending to certain things, exiling the others. And then at the end, what ends up conquering is the return of the exiled, right? All the memories. And it's like the return of the Rohirrim at Helm's Deep. And it comes in and it just conquers this. And then you have truth wins over the false narrative that was created by anxiety. And you have a reestablished sense of identity. And so I feel like that's also an exile story, the return of the exile.
Yes. Oh, it absolutely is. And I am going to connect it back to something you said earlier about like how we have to love every brother, no matter how unpleasant and how difficult that may be. You're absolutely right, because the exact same thing happened internally with Riley. So like one of the things that happened, like when you said, Sean, about, loving every exile and bringing them back in, I think like anxiety had exiled herself, had created this little like literal tornado of just like that kept everyone else out because she couldn't let go of the console. And that's like this kind of sense of when it feels so important, I can't let go. And that very thing, well, and at one point, after she is just lays down in exhaustion, anxiety says, I only wanted to help her. And that's exactly it. It's like even the unpleasant feelings, even the deeply problematic emotions we have that cause us a lot of pain and cause our families a lot of pain. They're only trying to help because they are made by God, and God only makes good things. And of course, sin, death, and the devil and demons, like they all twist that. But the core is good. And so it's really important to like love even our anxiety. And I know that sounds really weird, and I tell that to my clients, and they go, "What the heck are you talking about? I'm here to get rid of this crap." And I go, "Well, okay, but like Jung tells us, what we resist persists. So you fight and you push and you try to make this not be the case, and you're just exiling it, and you're exiling a part of you that, like you were saying about what Josh was saying, it actually has something important to tell you, and you miss that information when you do that. What we need to do instead is what happens at the end of Inside Out 2, where anxiety gets her own little chair with her anxiety tea that she can drink whenever she needs it, and she can just kind of sit there and go and relax. And so like the solution at the end of the movie was not how do we get rid of this awful part of me. It was how do we help this part of me be loved. And so again, love is the answer.
It meets you where you are with what you need when you need it.
Yeah.
In order to do that, though, we have to be aware. I think that's one of the things that makes this movie so unique also, is that even for the children, it makes you that much more aware of the fact that the internal self is like a reality, right? Like obviously in the movie it's conceptual, and it's not like you have little people running around in your head. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you're aware of the fact that internally things are happening just as much, if not more so, than things actually happening out here. And so I think what happens, and Sean, you had mentioned specifically anxiety building for Riley a false narrative in the second film. In the first film, it's Joy trying to build a false narrative. And the false narrative is only false because it excludes the other, right? And so one of the things that comes out of that for me is the recognition, again, this is something that I've repeated on probably the last 10 podcasts I've been on this channel and others, is that Christianity is not something I do. It's not something you do. It is something we do. Christianity is not itself without the we. Right? Like that's what it means to be part of the body, is to be part of the we. Not to be just simply the I. And I've said this 1,000 times too. You're not the main character of your own disjointed story. You aren't. And thank the Lord that you aren't. There's no way you could fill the whole shoes of the universe single-handedly. Good luck to you. Every version of that story is going to end in insufficiency, just like it did for anxiety, just like it did for Riley in the moment where she was having that breakdown. All of that is terribly identifiable because all that existed in that moment was me. And the only me that she had attached to herself in that moment was the one that inspired her to say, I am not enough. I'm not good enough. When at the beginning of the movie, the integration of all 5 of the original fundamental emotions, that integration brought about a revelation to herself, when this is, I think, the first time that we see introduced in between the first 2 movies. I can't think of any instance in the first movie where, despite the consensus of the emotions internally, Riley makes her own decision. The little girl at the front of the class in the second movie drops her stuff, and everybody's laughing, and she feels, embarrassment because of her disgust sensitivity. She feels frustration because the other kids are mocking her. She doesn't like that. She's sad. Sadness is feeling that each one of them has an idea about what to do about it. And Riley, the thing above and beyond the emotions, she's now a self. That's when the conception, or like her perception of self, really develops. Is I can be a good friend. That's something I can be. I can say that's me. That's who and what I am. I can identify with that. I'm going to embody that. She gets up and does with the body what the conceiving of self does internally. She's in that moment more integrated than virtually the rest of the entire films, right?
Yep.
That moment is where she's the most Riley version of herself, is when she makes that declarative statement, I'm going to be this, and then goes and embodies that thing.
It's like when Peter keeps his eyes on Christ, he can walk on the water, right? So it's like this is setting the course. This is the telos. This is what I am, where I'm going. It's kind of like a logos of your own. This is who I am.
Yeah. And we see a little picture of that, like you were talking about that anxiety storm, Josh, and that whole picture of an anxiety, a panic attack, really resonated with several of my clients, and they were like, I have never seen it portrayed so well. But what I loved as the counselor is the way in which it showed the way to get out of it. And so what she did was she started like slowing her breathing down, so being connected to her body, started like feeling the wood grain on the chair, so like grounding herself with her tactile senses, soaking in the light coming from the window and feeling that beauty. And so ultimately what became healing for her was the world that God created, the here and now, to what is actually real outside of what happens in here. And in connecting to that and connecting to, and I know the movie didn't portray it as connecting to God, but I can't help but see a light shining through a window and a character basking in its glow and think about, this is the light of heaven. I don't just mean that, like, again, this is not just symbolically, because there's no such thing. Like, there's a reason why we have that thought in our head, because it connects to a pattern of reality. But anyway, all that to say, there's an example of that's what pulled Riley out of that anxiety and that panic attack, is to be able to connect to beauty, connect to truth, and connect to goodness all at the same time.
Through her body. Right? And
that's why it matters.
What a brilliant, it's a brilliant movie. I mean, Spencer, when you were talking about how anxiety exiled herself in the tornado, what a powerful image. What a powerful image. And it's really interesting the way it closes, because it's like after that moment of reintegration, so the second time she reintegrates everything and finds that proper alignment. I think it's absolutely appropriate to say, right? I mean, look, that's what the Spirit does. He meets you through the body, through repentance and reconciliation in a communal form, and you are reintegrated and you are reset. And what I loved about that was what followed, which was joy, to come again and take the helm in a way that joy has waited for some time, right? You can almost sense the tangible, like, is this real? And, I'm also reminded of Hebrews 12, right? Like Christ came to meet us, to rebuild that community, to lead the way in doing that, to demonstrate and embody that reconciliation. And he did it for the joy that was set before him, right? And that joy is with all of us. It's not just, it's not him alone. That's not the joy, right? The joy was to bring that body to himself. And what a beautiful picture.
And I think Lewis would totally agree with anxiety exiling itself as a picture of hell, right? And the great divorce. Hell is, why is there nobody here? Well, because they've all moved so far away, because they can't stand to be around anybody else. This idea of self-exile. I'm going to be me. I'm not going to allow anybody to interact. I'm not going to let anybody participate. And that's its own form of hell.
And they finally do become the main character of their own disjointed story forever. It becomes irrevocable at that point. Yeah. And that's Saint Sean twin. There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
It's the beard.
It is.
We are sporting some beards on this call.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. One day. Maybe I'll have to be a garbage man. That's true. I think you and Garrett have darker beards.
I have a question. Now, Spencer, they didn't talk about this. But I want to throw something on the table. We're at an hour and a half, so whether we continue or we pick it up in a part 2, the only thing about the movie that I would maybe point at was that I think, and particularly once you're on the backside of puberty or even in puberty, I think it would be a relevant point to say that. Let me ask you instead of just say it, but do those kinds of things ever just show up from the outside world? Are there any invaders or imposters that can come in to try and direct somebody?
Well, puberty is our time period where we are the most sensitive to our sense of self in relation to everybody else. So like when we're younger, that developmental stage is more about like, do I fit in with my family and my close tribe? And then as we get older, as we hit puberty and our bodies change, so we kind of have to be aware of our bodies and not always in, pleasing ways. And of course that has its own social dimension because we're so inward focused, then we become so outward focused so that we can solve the inward problem. Like if everybody else likes me and if I look good and if I look attractive, then I will feel better about myself. And so anyway, so to answer your question, absolutely yes, because once puberty hits, that is the time where all of the external influences come flooding in, and they often drown. And I don't mean that like in a crash and burn and something really, and going into a mental hospital or anything like that. I just mean like the sense of self drowns, right? And it has to be resurrected. So,
and speaking of themes like resurrection, what's really interesting too is in the movie you actually have toward the end of the first movie, you have the awakening in Riley's internal thought life mind world. Let's say the awakening of something like self-sacrifice. And from the most unlikely character really is after joy and sadness and the core memories get exiled from the control center and thrown into the back of the mind, they're trying to get back to the control center. Incredibly enough, sadness is the only one that's been exiled long enough to learn about the mind and know her way back to the control center. That's a whole nother thing. But in their journey back, they encounter someone that was forgotten. They, as the exiles, gather together with somebody else who had been in that position, and they met Bing Bong. Exactly. My daughter knew exactly what I was talking about. She said, "It's Bing Bong." Yes, Bing Bong, the imaginary friend, was forgotten about because Riley is just too old for that now. And because Riley has forgotten and Bing Bong is in this existential crisis of being forgotten and not having a purpose anymore, doesn't know what exactly he's good for and how he's supposed to best love Riley now. Right. And so he's experiencing his own desert wilderness experience. And so these other two main characters compared to him come together with him, and they're like, "Oh, well, you could help us get back." And he's kind of just like, "Yeah, I don't know that like I could really help you because I'm like Riley's forgotten me and all these things." And he feels like he's falling apart. Joy keeps trying to do what Sean complained that the church is doing when people have real life issues, is giving platitudes and really rather hollow two-dimensional advice by way of catchphrases rather than and "Oh, don't you remember this thing? It was so good. Don't you remember this thing? It was so good." And that wasn't the antidote to genuine despair. That wasn't the antidote to a question of meaning. That wasn't the antidote to a genuine low place. Remarkably enough, it was the empathic hug of sadness that brought Bing Bong back out of the pit, right? And so later on, when sadness has been seen by Joy giving of herself to this person and not trying to fix it, not trying to change it, being there with the person in what's happening.
Hmm.
Joy gets the experience of recognizing sadness as an emotion in her own right, with the right to exist. Like, you have not only does Bing Bong have a purpose that he was looking for, Joy recognizes sadness's purpose in that moment. And then later, when she herself is dropped into the pit and dropped in, and her and Bing Bong are trapped in the memory trash bin, basically at the bottom of the world. They're in Sheol, right? They're dead. They're in death. And Joy needs to come back out of it. And the only way she's going to get out is with the help of this imaginary friend. The imaginary friend realizes that the vehicle they're using has power enough to get to the top of the ledge, but not with both of them. Right. And it was because sadness acted in that moment and brought Bing Bong back into his purpose. As silly as it is to use these names, it feels weird to say it out loud and use so seriously. But really, Bing Bong learned purpose, gathered meaning, became a self-sacrifice love expression toward Riley by getting Joy out and allowing himself to be forgotten. He said, I've served my purpose now. The best way I can serve Riley is by getting you back to where you belong and going where she put me anyway. And that's okay with me now, because someone has felt with me through it, right? And Joy learns both from watching sadness give her a hug, or give him a hug and just love him for a minute, and seeing the reaction of him. That, like, the greatest power that he got out of being identified with was the ability to treat himself like something else could be bigger, something else could be better. When somebody shows you that you matter to them, you're much more likely to gain those moments of genuine courage and self-sacrifice and bring the better about for other people. And that's what the gospel does to us. We recognize somebody has loved me. Somebody has loved me and been with me. They're willing to share with me all of the pieces. He didn't just buy the treasure. He bought the dirt too. He intends to come back and retrieve the treasure, but he takes everything for himself, right? And not in like a stealing sort of way. It's in a really remarkable, generous and encompassing sort of way that the Lord draws us in. And once we experience that love and that self-sacrifice to give of himself to me, then I'm so much more capable and willing and able to do the same thing for someone else. And it's only after I've received that I can give it. I can't give you something that I don't have. And if I want to be a blessing, I really need to be blessed. You know what I mean? So like that to me was one of the most transformative parts of the movie, is recognizing that sadness had her place, Joy having that revelation, and then Bing Bong having that revelation, and that bringing about the self-sacrifice that brought Joy back. And then Joy has to do the same thing with sadness, go and retrieve her, because just like Riley has decided to run away because everything fell apart, she's blaming whatever is she's blaming. Sadness is blaming herself and deciding that she needs to be disposed of. So she runs away. Now Joy is saved out of the pit, and what she does with it is go and save the next person. Perfect gospel like patterns being represented throughout that, on its way toward the first reconciliation, right? Like that internal thing that's going to bring about Riley finally having the moment of repentance is when Joy says, I concede, I defer to you. Sadness, touch it, because this is how the parents will know that something is wrong, and Joy will come afterward. I'm ready to take my place too. That's beautiful.
That reminds me of the, I can't remember which evangelist it was, but there was a ship that sank, and he went around asking people if they knew Christ. And he had gone to this boy, and the boy said, no, go away. And he comes back to him like 15 minutes later, and they're all freezing. And he's like, do you know Christ? Or do you want to know Christ? And the boy's like, no, I don't. And he takes off his coat and he gives it to him, and he says, we're both not going to get out of here. You need this more than me. And it kind of just reminds me of that, you know, the self-sacrifice. We can't both get out of here, but I have this inside me that makes me will the good of the other. Maybe even a more pertinent one is the story of the Catholic priest in the Nazi death camp, who decided to take the place of one of the prisoners because he knew Jesus, and he was like, "No, I'm gonna take that place because we both can't get out of here, but I'll stand in the place of you." And I just think that that's beautiful, and that's something that, you know, Christ empowers us to do when we understand that we are loved, and we are made whole through Christ, and then we can go on healing the way He healed by self-sacrifice.
We don't need reciprocation. We have it in Christ. We can love generously, right? That little boy, while he did not want to hear about Christ, met him when the gentleman gave his coat to him. You know, it's really interesting to me, Davidson. I thought that was so beautiful. Thank you for that. It reminded me that, you know, the way you guys were talking about Bing Bong, I don't know if I can say this, so if you guys disagree, let me know, but it's almost like Bing Bong is its imaginary embodied form of her youth and innocence. And that had to give itself up so that Riley could become something greater. And if you don't, you're just Peter Pan, and you never grow up, and you never do anything except stay in Neverland for your whole life, fantasizing about nonsense, right? So that was just beautiful picture. Even the movie is so good. It's so good.
Yeah, it's a rite of passage. That's what it is. It's like every time you see a rite of passage movie, what you're seeing is a death and resurrection motif play itself out when it's done properly, mind you. There's a death and resurrection motif where the and this is something that you experience as a parent long before the child experiences it, and the parents continue to experience it, by the way. That's what movies like Freaky Friday and stuff like that, those are also young and old rite of passage kind of stories, right? Where you have the transitional space that's happening in both worlds. When the infant turns into a toddler, the infant gives way to the toddler. The infant is no more. It is the same as the infant has gone now. The infant has passed away. What you have instead is the toddler. And you, as a parent, accept and welcome that transition, but you also mourn it. And it's weird that you mourn it, because you ask yourself, why am I sad? I always look at my kids and I go, God, your face was perfect before you had teeth. It was so beautiful. And look at you guys, like, you're amazing. But God, I miss your gumly little nubby faces. Like, you were so perfect. You know what I mean? I don't get that anymore. That's gone now. It's gone from me. And in its place is something that has graduated into so many different things that I am so happy and proud of. But those pieces are gone. And this is, I think, what kind of like births the awkward and ugly faces of things like The Devouring Mother, is trying to latch onto those things and denying the child the rightful passage. And keeping them in Sheol. They never get the resurrection moment. They stay down there. And that's something that I think that, like, it's not necessarily hinted on in this story, but it's in a lot of stories where somebody is really drawn away from experiencing the right kind of things that would bring them up into maturity, right? Those things are kept from them and they're sheltered from them because of their parents. If I'm because it's Halloween time, if I'm not too embarrassed to look there, I would look at the Halloween Town movie, the first one. You know, like, the main character Marnie is like a witch, right? And her mom is a witch, and her grandma is a witch, but she doesn't know that because her mom's been literally lying to her whole life, being like, no, I don't want you to have any of this potential because of all the dangers that come with it. And the daughter's like, you literally never even consulted me in the slightest as to whether what I am going to be is authentic. Like, you're taking some of the central facets of who and what I am, and you're hiding them from me so that I'll stay what you want me to be. That's terrifying. The mother ends up learning that this is not a good idea and integrates the daughter. But it's like, there's a lot of stories that are like that, where the mother or the father is like, no, you can't have, because it's some such thing. I've told their anxiety is the one talking, some such thing that tells them exactly. Yeah. That's another Disney movie. Luck of the Irish was another one where the parents were hiding this like central facet of identity from the kid, and the kid's like, all of this whole thing, everything makes sense now that this piece is in place. Why did you know what I mean? Like, why'd you hide it from me? And it's like the parents are always so mournful of the fact that they hid it. And it was always the same thing that anxiety said. I was just trying to help. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's this excess of protective mother love sometimes that denies the person that moment of transformation and the rite of passage that it is that you were just describing, Garrett. Like, that's exactly what it is. That's what both of these movies are. They're the experience of the rite of passage made explicit. Just like that's what she's doing. That's what the emotions are experiencing. Like the expansion of the console, all of those scenes, like that's what that's illustrating is the change that's happening is chaotic and but you have to trust the process. But there's nobody inside to tell you that, you know, like you're in a position where you're kind of just doing this guesswork. You know what I mean?
I do. You know, one of these stories, take it for what it is, but Atreus in the God of War series, it literally almost kills him to not be allowed to grow in this way by having this lie held from him. So I just want to say that, but I also want to, if we can, I feel like where we just got with the story about Bing Bong actually pulls this entire episode full circle. We're talking about these rites of passage. We're actually talking about the Exodus stories, how these stories lead to moments of critical moments in your life where trauma can develop and hang with you for a really long time, or you can integrate and you know, Lord willing, you eventually integrate at some point. You generate that healing. But that is, I love this because it starts, that trip back up starts with self-sacrifice. Bing Bong sacrificing, like it started that way. In that, and look, the other beauty of that is no one is too deep. That trauma is not buried so far back. It is not buried so long ago that someone cannot meet you in that pit and bring you back and put your feet up on the rock, right? Because that is what loving sacrifice does. And it brings you back through that communal reconciliation. On the backside of this is your life and joy. And I just loved it. I mean, I think that pulls this whole thing full circle.
You're muted.
I was saying, and on that note, I'm going to have to wrap up and leave. So, well, thank you very much, guys. And I really appreciate it.
Spencer, it's an honor.
Yeah,
God bless you and your family, and again, thank you for everything you do, and for dealing with my nonsense all the times. I know thank you.
It's all right. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you, bro.
I think we should set up a part 2. Okay.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think before we even started, I intuited the fact that there was going to be content, though. Yeah,
it's just really fertile ground. You know, we didn't talk about. I think we could delve further into transpersonal personalities. You know, particularly the bit we mentioned there at the end about foreign agents coming in, because. Although that wasn't included in the movie in a super explicit way, that's real. You know, agents are coming in to try and take that person right out of the thing and plant a new one in with a new story and a new narrative. And so maybe, yeah, that's real. I felt it. Whoever just said that comment, I felt it too. And so, you know, I think we should set up a part 2. I think we should go a little bit deeper into this. Thank you, Prudence. I was blessed by this, Davidson. I don't know about you, but what a profound thing. And to remember that these moments of that the Exodus story didn't just happen once in the life of Christ. Oh, no one thought I was going to say that, did they? No, everyone's thinking of the Exodus in the book of Exodus, but the real one was Christ. It was the cosmic Exodus. He is the pattern. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. It echoes backwards and forward in time. And so, yes, we see the Exodus as this dim resolution, beautiful story, right? Maybe many of you are thinking of what is that gentleman's name in the 10 Commandments?
Charlton Heston.
Heston. Yeah, something like that. Like everyone's thinking Charlton Heston, right? But look, this is something that's going to apply to everybody every day, because you're all going somewhere. That's the simple version of everybody's story. You're going somewhere. There's only one other story, which is you're going to meet an obstacle on your way, and it's going to have to transform, right? So this is every day. You're driving to the gas station and there's traffic. Okay. Are you going to let that traumatic moment, let a spirit come overtake you? Are you going to let a foreign invader come in and act through you? Because that certainly isn't you when you're road raging, is it? No. Right? So these are going to come out every day, every person, all the time. And every single one of them is a moment of critical opportunity or challenge, because it can also develop these traumas that we then carry and that we bury and carry, right? Would be a good way to say it. And what's the way through? Ideally, you're there in the moment to help that person from spiraling. But if you are not, that person doesn't need platitudes. They are not too far gone. They need you to get in the mud and stand next to them.
Yeah.
Give yourself, because in you giving of your life in that way, a seed is planted that is a beautiful flower when it rises back above the ground.
Yeah. Amen. Amen, dude. Yeah. You know, and Joy was willing, as you said, you know, someone who's not Riley, but someone who's integral to who Riley is, was willing to risk everything to bring back who she was, right? So to go down to the shale, to go down to the deepest depths, to sit with her in the pit, and then to bring back who she was, to manifest that back, and then allow her to change, to be willing to sacrifice for her, and then let her go. And that's beautiful.
And now everyone knows how Christian this story actually is.
Spoiler alert again. man, I love this. I am pleased. I am so pleased. Absolutely part 2. Absolutely crucial. Going to need a part 2. I think expanding more on the more complex emotions that emerge in the second movie, and perhaps the arising of that character called Riley that can be in, among, and above her emotions, make her own decisions, is not merely the compilation character and the immediate expression of whoever has the microphone loudest, but in fact is a person, right? That integration that happens on the more mature level, the hilariousness that puberty brings about, but also the heartache and the difficulty that it is. They kind of integrate the parents more in the second movie. I think it's going to be a good one. So if that's of interest to you and you're still listening right now, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see the second one and you have things that you think we didn't touch from the first one, let me know in the comments. I'm going to read them. I try to interact with everybody fairly, but there's a lot of comments, so be patient with me. But I do read them. But yeah, like let us know what you want to hear about in the next one, because I'm convinced that there has to be a part 2. But as far as you guys, I thank you so much for your input and your eagerness, Garrett. I'm so glad that you were able to join. You are awesome, and it is a blessing to me every time you're here. For Spencer, who's not here, again, check out his YouTube channel and podcast, The Trauma Informed Church Kid. That is going to be another area where you can find more of him, more of his passion, which is really to deal with spiritual traumas and the healing of the person in a very holistic, acknowledge the body and metaphysical portion of the person together, big picture kind of thing. I think he does a good job with explaining those things. You'll find some of the guys from Cosmic Corner over there as well, and he's got a lot to say. His channel's very new, but he's got a lot of good things out already. So go and check out his channel. That is the Trauma Informed Church Kid, and with that, I am satisfied. I think we're ready to round off. So I'm okay with it. God bless you guys. Thank you for listening. You guys have had a free therapy session no charge. You know, but if the check is in the mail, thank you. But you know, I really thank everybody who's listening. Some of the cool input that we've had in the chat. Everybody was very attentive. It seemed like there wasn't a whole lot, you know, of questions or anything that came out, but there was some really solid commentary that the chat was giving too. So that was cool, and I appreciate all your guys' interaction. But for the end of the night, oh man, good night.
WETPTS.
Yeah. Wet Pet San Pablo. Shout out.
Pet San Pablo.
Yeah. Shout out to Wet Pet San Pablo.
Wet Pet San Pablo.
And so for people who don't know,
Sorry.
San Pablo is a place in the Bay Area in California, and there's a small pet shop that was or is still perhaps there. I don't know.
It's open still.
I don't think that it is open still, but it was there, and that was their jingle in the
You
late
can look it up on
90s,
YouTube.
early 2000s. Yeah, you probably can find it on YouTube.
Oh,
Find it on
yeah.
YouTube and tell
The
them Cosmic Corner sent you there.
They're sending memories up into the bank that are just like the Juicy Fruit commercial. You know, it's happening right now.
Exactly.
It's been a pleasure always, Davidson. It is a pleasure and an honor. You have personally changed my life. Just our conversations, the stuff we have worked through together, the language I feel like we've built together is literally changing my life, and my ability to talk about these things with people and help them see it in a way that this movie helps people see it. And Sean, it was wonderful. You said so many profound things. I think I might just go pray for a few minutes. Thank you so much for everything and for meeting you face to face. Obviously, we chat a little bit here and there. I'm just the wild guy who comes in and says a bunch of nonsense and leaves. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. God bless all of you. Jesus is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. Follow him and be healed and watch healing happen in front of your face. But it's not through platitudes. Sean, when you said that, I don't know why, but it hit me so hard that how true that is, and how much of a quick dismissal it is, as opposed to what Christ did, which was to come and get in the pit with us. May we all do the same, and may we all follow the way for the glory of his name, I pray.
Amen and amen.
And amen again.
Thank you for watching Cosmic Corner. Good night. God bless. Stay like Christ.